understand the battle stations.
Hello and welcome to Kahs-wan Reviews. Kahs-wan is a trial of survival that Vulcans go through. So I call the show that when it is a trial to review something. That's also why we're in a desert here. I'm anti-derivative Jill, and today I will be sharing some thoughts I had while watching the latest episode of Star Trek Patrick, Season 2, Episode 2, called Penance. Before we get into that, I would like to thank um, the chat today. Today we have Cosmic Jerry. Thank you for being here, or at least you were here earlier. And thank you for being here, Raymond Feliciano. And watching this episode itself was the penance. I realized I probably shouldn't be doing this to myself anymore, but here I am anyway. I think it's just curiosity of watching a train wreck into a factory of manure. So this episode gives a recap of the previous one, which is strange because after last week's review, I did make my own mini review for last week's episode, which is usually reserved for real Star Trek episodes. But it's a pretty good recap. The recap from season 1 for Star Trek Patrick was, as Doomcock reminds us, the robot flower aliens from another dimension don't go away when you hang up a phone they created. So all organic life in the universe is already dead. Nothing in the show is real. All of it's fake, even in its own universe. So that is always a good reminder we need to have anytime I try to review any of this new stuff. The first episode had more speedy, spinny camera violence. Ship operations occurred automatically and magically because writing real Trek dialogue is hard. We don't know anyone anyway, so characterization is a bust. The crew disobeys ceasefire, and it only requires one officer to trigger self-destruct, and all of the murderous psychopaths from season 1 are all in Starfleet now. Watch the action and forget the logic. Real-looking Trek ships appear in the show that do not belong, and neither does the Enterprise music. Patrick has word salad romance with his Romulan servant that he rebukes. And this episode retcons Picard's dad to be a spousal abuser, retconning his real reason for going to the stars being that he used them as a security blanket, not to seek out new life and explore. He gives away a book by Spock that gives him an emotional quote using the word exhilaration when it should have been fascination. He gives a word salad speech saying to forget about the past. It's insinuated that Seven had bad social skills because of Borg prejudice and not because of her assimilation. Plus, this show retconned those issues anyway. Picard visits Guinan. Diplomacy with the Borg is taken seriously. We see smoking on the bridge. The new Stargazer has Borg tech. The Borg Queen is possibly Picard's mom, the way they're presenting her. Q addresses Patrick like he's really Picard and not an android. So, again, let's go here to our first slide here. So again here, now we're on the episode 2, Penance. And here we have an ongoing theme where Picard's opening shot is always one of him either bent over or on the ground or in some otherwise low position. I'm not sure if this is something that will keep up or something that they keep wanting to do, but I'll be watching for it. And what's hard for me on this episode is that I love Q, so it's tough for me to see him just express word salads that give no clue to anything. I mean, it's just tough. Anyway, a siren is wailing outside Earth orbit. Now, I can't really fault that because we often hear objects in space like beeping satellites or explosions. But really, the reason why we're hearing this siren is that we're supposed to be feeling what we are seeing. So what are we seeing? We're seeing this. Below, we're supposed to realize weapons are being fired, and we see Earth is covered in a force field for some reason. And we're back to that good old Kurtzman dystopian nightmare. Goldsman is really good at relaying his dreams, apparently. So I make note whenever they make an attempt to factor in the science, but you don't have to worry too much about that in this episode. So this is completely unheard voiceover that was nonetheless included in the captions that reads, "Atmospheric sweepers coming online and particle pollution down to 23% in upper troposphere." And we'll see if that's related to anything later. So Picard is just figuring out he's not in Kansas anymore and that the Stargazer no longer exists in this alternative timeline. Q makes a cheesy reference to another alternative timeline episode directly referencing yesterday's Enterprise. So I can see that they are still pulling for member berries this episode now that they no longer have to be 25% different, yet are still somehow 100% different. So Not Q says that this new timeline is due to the actions that humans have made, not him. He's claiming this anyway. This is just my interpretation of some of his word salad. Whether this will make any sense remains to be seen. Picard counters that he's done with Q's games. He says he's not Q's pawn, but Q counters that Picard is really the whole board, so he's the game. Picard tries to ask what the point is, but Q just hints that everything's bleeding and that he has patched it up, but it's still a wound or something. Granted, it's natural for Q to speak in nonsense riddles sometimes, but still the audience has learned nothing except that John Delancey can speak nonsense and make it sound good. Picard guesses that Q isn't well, and this causes Q to snap them to Picard's vineyard, where it looks like he hasn't harvested yet. Now, Q finally admits that he had a hand in what happened to the Stargazer, which is more nonsense. Q just happened to want to see John Luke at that very moment, so he searched the universe for the nearest explosion, surmising that would be where to find him. That's pretty dumb considering Picard hasn't been doing anything for 20 years, before the Romulan biker gang started chasing him ineffectually last season. But he's supposed to be Q, so he can do whatever he wants, and probably doesn't see time linearly. I think that's why the writers are using Q, because they can finagle him to fit whatever they can come up with. And Q continues to deflect with what is now feeling like banal dialogue to fill up time before the action. In fact, it's so banal and uninspiring and uninformative that the writers seem to think they need to make a practical god a human. So Q slaps Picard just for inquiring about his crew, and it looks pretty ugly. There's no point to it. I'm not even going to go over the dialogue here because it is dumb and it adds nothing to anything. All he is doing is insulting Picard and being vague, and we quickly get to the title of the episode. He says he's not giving Picard a lesson this time, but penance. So there it is. Again, we have another season of STP where Picard has to make up for some perceived past sin. Q then accuses humans of the previous timeline of originally murdering the planet, but figuring out a way to heal it. However, in this timeline, he says that the planet is already dead, but just kept on life support. It's never really mentioned again, so I don't really understand the reasoning for this kind of explanation. I guess that's the explanation for the force field and the atmospheric sweepers we heard about earlier. Well, there you go. That's what that's about, I guess. Let's Anyway, that's all that is. Kurtzman Trek doesn't know how to create or be futuristic, so now we have servants scrubbing the floors again and doing stuff, and this is just tiring. And it turns out they're not even servants. They're slaves in this universe where money is still in circulation. And so we're definitely no longer in the post-scarcity world, which is what the writers always wanted because they only know how to write suffering, torture, and despair. And Raymond Feliciano in the chat says that, and a robot can bleed. Yes. Yes. Essentially, they've set up Picard to be a robot that's exactly like a human. It's like a synth from Blade Runner, I guess. I don't know. But worse. At least Picard counters that he would never do this. He would never have slaves. But Q just says some random garbage. This is Q's response. Makes no sense. Such moral convictions are the luxury of the victors, which is just more word salad. He's trying to be profound, but it's just crap. Then apparently everything Picard just said about never doing this was all just talk. Because then he takes no time to try to talk to these Romulans, to tell them to take it easy, get something to eat, and rest. No, he just leaves them there and leaves them in the room. And we go here. Oh, this room. I don't know what this is a trophy room, apparently. And when Q walks through this room, he says, "Through a mirror darkly," which is, of course, another reference to the Mirror Universe episode from Enterprise. And this isn't a mirror darkly. This is a psychotic nightmare. And it is so dreary and uninteresting. In this timeline, Picard murdered many enemies and keeps their skulls. Gul Dukat, for example, was responsible for providing evil Picard's android body. And General Martok was killed by a bioengineered virus, which also killed all but 10% of the population of Kronos because they said it was decimated. So luckily, the writers don't have to write in any Klingons. This is their excuse for that, at least in this series. If they're still surviving, it'll take eons for them to rebuild. Also, in this different timeline, they decapitated Sarek in front of Amanda and Spock. So they finally give this alternative timeline a name. They call it the Confederation instead of the Federation, with Picard as a general who conquers worlds. And I'm going to skip more of the nonsense word salads from Q and only relay what's comprehensible, though it still doesn't really make sense. The only thing he says here that makes any difference is that Picard isn't even he's not even his original self. He's now that genocidal Picard, even though he has the memories of, the different timeline. So that I believe that they did that so they don't have to make Picard meet his mirror self, because we already know that it's a different timeline, so that they don't have to do all those the special effects to do any mirror stuff. So they skip over that pretty easily that way. And so everyone else is just like that. So we won't see any of the mirror of any of the characters. They're skipping it. So this was a pretty ugly room with all of these skulls and everything. Even worse, of course, is what they did to the Enterprise D here. I'm not really sure it's what's happening in this picture. It's certainly not the Enterprise D, but that's what it seems like they're trying to paint there. And Q offers Picard atonement and forgiveness. But atonement and forgiveness for what? For what an evil Picard has done? Q says that Picard knows what for, and Picard gives a look like he knows too, but we don't. I don't know. I'd have to talk to somebody else who's seen this episode, because I haven't looked at any other reviews yet. This whole thing is dumb and dark and dreary. Picard says he won't go along with Q's atonement plan. An android asks if he should be called Q because Q is now gone, and he doesn't come back for the rest of the episode, having just moved the plot along, as I believe now is his only real purpose. It's really a waste of John Delancey's immense talent. We hear a recording of the Dark Picard and how he's fighting to purify the universe. Very much like, Hitler or any other genocidal dictator. So everyone's saying this is a Nazi universe. We're completely correct. Despite what he does, he calls other civilizations savage and warlike. Definitely a psychopath, which is what we need more of in our fiction these days, right? This conquering brought Earth wealth since, again, this universe still has money. It's a recruitment video for anyone who wants to go out and kill all sentient life except for humans. He drinks black coffee instead of tea, and meanwhile, Patrick is still looking for Laris, and the android tells him she and her husband were part of a Romulan independence movement where they were killed. And the android offers Picard a viewing of their bodies at the Museum of Conquest. And by this point, we get it already. It's dark and depressing, and the writers think they've earned it because they showed us a few nice ships that look okay in the last episode. A shuttle is coming for Picard to take him to the President's Palace for Eradication Day. And at this point, I cracked up during the scene because the whole thing is a parody now. The writers are having fun making this disgusting vision, and you can tell just how much fun they're having. Usually, even if you want to show this, you show some kind of hope against it, but Picard stood up for nothing so far. All he had to do was help the Romulans up in that room just give a little hope there, but he didn't. He's just sitting there doing nothing. So that's the ugly world there. So Seven, I presume, has also been transferred from her previously ex-Borg body to a completely human one. So now her birth name is being used, Annika. She discovers this. Then she discovers her dark timeline badge and her wedding ring. And in order to determine if her brain is still functioning correctly, she does an equation. E to the I times pi plus 1 equals 0. This is a reference to Euler's identity, where when that is true, so is e to the I times pi is equal to -1. So we all know that I is the imaginary number that is equal to the square root of -1, and pi is what you get when you divide the circumference of a circle by its diameter. So I have no reason to have gone off on that, except for a quick break from the episode. But if you want to know more about this equation, please check out the link in the description that I'll put in after the show. I predict that this equation will be the only thing of value anyone ever garners from this episode. I don't claim to be an expert on it, though, since I only went up to Calculus 3, but I still like to watch videos like this. And there it is. There's that equation I was talking about just a moment ago. Anyway, moving on. Someone comes in and wishes her a happy eradication day because she is to give a speech as she is the president. The man is her husband, and he talks some details about death and the Empire. But do you really care? Let's just skip that part. Seven asks to speak with the Federation officer, knowing it's Confederate now instead of Federation. At least she's trying something and not just sitting there. So, of course, the first general that she happens to find when she's going through the database is Colonel Rios. The display here says the particular war that he's commanding uses 55K ships and 30 million troops. And when she corrects herself to say Confederation instead of Federation, her husband says he'll phone General Cisco because they had to go there. So, but I'm glad to report that Cisco is not in this episode. She wants the privacy to talk to Colonel Rios. Then it's spinny violence time, um, lots of lots of laser battles here. Rios is back on the ugly warehouse ship from season 1. He's commanding a squadron who is fighting the Vulcans. And of course, the original Rios is confused, especially that they're fighting Vulcans, but he plays along because he doesn't know what's going on. Okay, so there's someone who's fighting under him who says that evil Rios said that Vulcans will meld your mind and scramble your balls. What does that even mean? I guess Vulcans have some weird powers in this timeline. 7 reaches Rios and recalls him back to Earth so they can meet. And hello in the chat to Sandra Feliciano. Thank you for being here. Then we cut to Okinawa, where a building is blown up, presumably because of the dissident behavior we heard about from Annika's husband. And that's where Elnor happens to be. He's thrust into the rebellion, being Romulan. The rebellion are terrorists blowing up buildings in response to the genocide on Cardassia, Andoria, Kronos, Vulcan, and Romulus. Whatever this act is, she believes it will free her. Well, she turns out to be wrong because she's quickly murdered in the next 2 seconds. So she really wasn't being introduced as a character, just exposition, just like Q was used for. Legolas is caught, and someone comes to shoot everyone but him, revealing herself to be Rafi, who also just happens to be in a position of higher authority, being called chief. So I guess the chief of police? But that's never verified. Nothing has been achieved this whole episode except to tell us our characters, who are now in the deep, dark universe that the writers always wanted to be in to begin with. And there's Legolas. And we cut back to 7 and the Eradication Day, which is the public display of murdering aliens and/or their allies. Dr. Girardi is supposed to be preparing one of those aliens for that murder. She has an AI video game cat that I didn't get a picture of, who doesn't like genocide and execution, but is programmed by her to be a friend anyway. Being the last one we see realizes she's an alternative timeline. I'm already bored by the whole bit, so I'll skip her awakening. The prisoner to be killed turns out to be the Borg Queen, who is clearly different from Picard's mom, so I believed at this point that my prediction from the last episode was wrong, at least at this moment of the show. And anyway, it could still be a red herring. I don't know. Anyway, this queen tries to reconnect to the hive. She says that the chronometer is misaligned, and she recognizes Annika as 7 of 9. 7 says the Borg Queen has a trans-temporal awareness that spans over different timelines and realities, in which they can hear echoes of other Borg from these different realities. So they have some kind of transdimensional telepathy or something, which is never, I don't think, has been established ever before. The stasis field inhibits those nanobots, however. So it takes past the half of the episode to get back to Android Picard for 2 seconds, and then cuts to Raffi saying she'll interrogate Elnor instead of whomever else would do it, which is backed up by Picard, who finally does something to help Elnor. So in this scene, they're reuniting, and you can tell the show is really trying hard to make these people characters this time. So I guess the writers only feel comfortable doing this in a dystopia. Seven's husband says that Picard is now handing out the title of Borg Slayer, or he gave it to himself. I'm not sure. Borg Slayer sounds like a username for someone playing Star Trek Online or something, but in a more positive way because that's what you have to do sometimes, slay Borgs. So everyone from the first timeline all dance around words just so that they can talk to each other alone. But Seven says the Borg Queen we just saw now. Seven says that Borg Queen that we just saw in the previous scene is not the same as the Borg Queen from the Stargazer. So the Borg mom theory is still alive. According to this scene, Q went back in time to change the 25th century, with Picard reiterating that he believes Q is unwell, unstable, and insane. And so Raymond Feliciano in the chat says it is cannon fodder for the writers and plot armor. Yeah, lots and lots of plot armor for sure. So this group goes to the Borg Queen, who is also aware of the time travel and reality manipulation. She calls what Q did a temporal rescission, as if Q took to time like a surgeon to make one change to cause Earth to be a genocidal empire. The change was made in 2024 in LA, where someone who can help exists, called the Watcher. Excuse me, I just got distracted because another friend is here in the chat. Hello here to LDG of Geeks and Joy. And right now I'm explaining how the Borg Queen is explaining what Q did to the timeline. And what Q did to the timeline, I'll go over that a little bit once again. It looks like Q took to time like a surgeon to make a change to cause Earth to be a genocidal empire. And the change was made in 2024, so just a little bit after our current time, in LA, where someone who can help exists, called the Watcher. But this information is given by a Borg, so this is given by the Borg Queen. So why is anyone taking what she's saying at face value? Seven first reminds the Borg Queen that the original reality will allow her to rejoin her collective as an incentive for the Borg Queen to agree to help, which she does. So that happened. At least Rio questions it. Agnes tries to help, saying the Borg Queen is in a stasis field. But that's just it. If she can get out of that stasis field, she will easily be able to overpower and assimilate whomever she wants. Then she'll be able to still time travel and get back to the collective even faster and with more support. Logically, that's what any normal genocidal Borg would do. He cannot transport them. So we're back to Rios. Of course, anyway, logic doesn't matter in this show, though. Anyway, Rios cannot transport them to the warehouse ship, so they're stuck having to celebrate this eradication day. They act like they know a plan to put a hole through the security net to transport, but they really don't explain anything. So nothing exemplifies more why we're the 735 Club than this scene. This is seriously horrendous, and I think I know why they're doing this. They make a past so terrible that you're supposed to forget the horrendous things that the crew did in season 1. Also, they have these characters hug each other now. That and this potential future is so bad that it makes these murder on or murder adjacent characters look better by comparison to this future. Meanwhile, Agnes Girardi's usual ability to magically fix something, but not at all explain what is happening, continues here. Obviously, she's hacking the badge to be able to communicate through security, but doesn't say how it works. It's just magic. Rios says he still has a lock on everyone, but that everyone will need to get their signals boosted. Oh, yeah, that reminds me sometimes in real 735 Star Trek, they would use pattern enhancer devices. They'd set up 3 of them in this triangle formation, and that would boost the signal. That's pretty convenient if they'd find these laying around. But no, of course, that's not what's happening. This time, we have Rafi at the magic CGI hacking station. Well, where she'll probably boost the signal there magically. But it turns out that's not even what she's doing, so I don't know who boosted the signal. They just made a show of knowing that they knew they had to do that. And hello in the chat to Gremlington. How are you doing today? Well, before all that happens, it cuts back to the speech, where they're ready to kill the Borg Queen, who is claimed to be needed for time travel. I feel like there must be better time travel methods than that, but that's what this story is going with. Rios and Agnes have a feeling scene, which we'll skip. Raffi takes down the shields via their computer, using this CGI computer here. And Rios and Agnes, all right, they do that. Raffi takes down the shields via their computer and then has Elnor kill all the guards, which he quickly dispatches with the comm badge that's like a bladed comm badge, so it's like a knife added to the comm badge. And Kurtzman treks Technobabble to tell us what's going on is Agnes saying the S word repeatedly over and over, and that is what this is. That was the extent of her explanation of what's happening. They escape to the warehouse ship, and Agnes does a better review of the entire episode than I do when she says, "That was all kinds of terrible." Actually, Rios helps with that review when he says, "Time travel is not a way to make me feel better about anything." Girardi begins connecting the Borg Queen to the ship because that is the only method anyone can think of to time travel, and they were all assimilated into the new collective. When the Borg then travels back to the original universe to rebuild her hive before invading and assimilating any sentient life. Wait, no, I'm sorry. That's what would have happened if this were actually Star Trek and our crew were stupid enough to collaborate with the Borg. What really happens is that Seven's first husband and staff come to the ship, shoot Elnor, and get angry, and that's it. That's the real ending to this fake episode of Star Trek. But I really hoped you guys enjoyed my review, despite what they're doing to Star Trek. And I believe I have permission to use this. This comes from the great Hungry Boy, who created it for Clodburn Times and Raquel, who review only the real 735 episodes of Star Trek, which aired from 1966 to 2005. And in that show, only the absolute worst episodes get the Clawbony, which is like a Zamboni, only stronger. But I don't know if even the Clawbony is strong enough to clean up this filth. That is Kurtzman Trek. But I'd like to thank them for the permission to use it here. And if you'd like to see more Star Trek convention-like reviews of real Star Trek, please head on over to Clodburn Times channel on Saturdays at 9 p.m. CST. And this show is just so unpleasant. This might even be my last review of it, because I don't know if I keep wanting to watch any of this, or maybe I might, I don't know. I don't know. This could be it here. I have too much other fun stuff to be doing. So this could be the last show here. It's taken up too much of my time away from real Star Trek. So to sum up for anyone who got here late, the characters are stuck in a dystopian fascist Earth with public executions. They all play magically important roles as if Q set it up that way, but the writers aren't smart enough to blame that on Q. Patrick has to pay penance for what evil Picard did, or something else that we're unaware of he's paying penance for. Seven is the president, and Rios leads some of the war along with Picard. And a different Borg queen from episode 1 is recruited to help, and she doesn't immediately assimilate everyone as soon as she can. Agnes and Rappy save the day with unknown CGI magic. I can't even call it pseudoscience, because they don't even portray that. Then Evil Seven's husband catches them. The end. And that's the end to my review. And thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to LDG of Geeks and Joy, and RN Feliciano, and Sandra Feliciano, and thank you to Gremlington for being here. And that's the end of my review today, so I'll see you guys later.
No opportunity. There was no pause. He just kept talking in one long, incredibly unbroken sentence, moving from topic to topic so that no one had a chance to interrupt. It was really quite hypnotic.